Welcome, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in this lovely world. And today we are thrilled that we have Dr. Noriko Yokoi, a seasoned expert in marketing, advertising, and startup advising in our studio. So, with over 20 years of experience, Noriko has worked with Fortune 100 companies and life science startups, leading successful campaigns and strategies. In 2018, she founded Startup Ideation to accelerate the growth of early-stage businesses and co-founded 3Cubed AI. Noriko also serves as a pitch judge for startup competitions, tricky word, and leads a meetup group of entrepreneurs. That's an easier. She holds a PhD from London School of Economics, a very nice university, a bachelor's degree from Sophia University, and certifications from MIT. Having lived in Vietnam, Australia, Japan, the UK, and now New York, Noriko is a recognized leader in the advertising and startup ecosystem. We are excited and curious on the insights we might learn today from Noriko. Welcome.
Thank you so
Why
much.
might learn? Of course, we will learn something.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah, the pleasure is all ours. And Thomas is absolutely right. It is that my expectation in overwhelming curiosity is more the driver for today's show. And I'm like a sponge or like SpongeBob, to say so. So I'm curious on how you go forward in several areas and what is driving you to this mission you are going for. And that would be my starting question I would like to place. Where do you see your personal mission and that of your company?
So I think my personal mission and my company's mission is pretty much aligned. As you welcome me on the show with 20 years of experience in advertising, one of the things that I'd always wanted to see in every opportunity that I had was to grow and innovate. And I feel like at times in advertising there wasn't as much innovation, and now is really the right time for it, and we can talk more about that. But because of that, I feel like the advertising industry is at a crossroads and would love to see more of the innovation and really thinking outside of the box. I mean, we use that term thinking outside of the box a lot in advertising, but I think this is a real opportunity to do so. So the mission is really to see what can happen, how we can break some of the molds and some of the things that we took for granted and come up with a new way of doing advertising. That's probably my mission.
Cool.
What brought you to advertising?
What
I mean, not that it is an absurd topic, but still curious.
Well, I mean, one of the things that when I was finishing off my PhD, one of the things that people talked about a lot was branding. How do you brand yourself? And I really didn't know how to do it. And I thought I really wanted to jump into understanding it. And where else would you go to learn about branding but New York, where there are lots of very, well-known advertising agencies where all they do day in and day out is to position brand companies and really raise awareness for each one of them and build them, build followers and etc. And that's one of the main reasons why I went into advertising. Just want to understand and demystify how advertising is done. And it's been, quite a journey learning about it.
You said it's at a crossroad. Can you evaluate or elaborate a little on
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's no hiding the fact that, ChatGPT, when it went public on November 30, 2022, really changed the content creation economy. And, when I say crossroads, if you think about advertising, it's changed a lot since, let's say, the 1950s, when it was all about TV and print, and it's, more about digital advertising. And there's been things that have impacted the industry a lot, but not so much in this way. And the reason why I say this is because ChatGPT basically turned advertising on its head, because until then, whenever you thought about advertising or what, campaigns on TV, or, watch Super Bowl and judge some of these ads, there was a mystery to it. You always wondered, how was advertising created? Whereas ChatGPT made it seem so, transactional, so easy, something that took us days, it can suddenly be done in minutes, seconds. And so it really put a spotlight on advertising and communications in general, where people were now saying, well, why does it take you so long to create advertising? And why would it cost this much? So it became a really, difficult, place for advertising agencies and the industry in general. That's why, at a crossroads, it really has put the entire question of content creation on its head.
So now, the cynic in me says there haven't been many good ads before. Well, there obviously are exceptions, And now having them created with tools like ChatGPT doesn't make them better. So what I usually say is it's instant mediocrity. So how to get great ads with the help of tools like these? What's the role of creativity? How does creativity change?
So that's a really great question. And I think there's been a lot of examples of generative AI ads in the marketplace that haven't had great feedback. I think one of the ones that came through recently was the Coca-Cola ad that was that ran over Christmas, and lots of criticism around it. It looked fake, didn't look very lively, etc. There are lots of adjectives that were used. The point is, I think in terms of creative, as in images and videos, that still is, very, very immature. I don't think you'll be able to create great video ad, 30-second ads, etc., using these generative AI tools yet. There's been a lot of sort of conversations around Sora when it came out. Wasn't exactly what they had expected. But when you think about text, and if you think about repetitive things that come with advertising, that's where you have a lot of benefit. So I think you have to sort of, break it down in terms of what parts of advertising can, generative AI benefit, and what areas of advertising does it not. So we can't sort of look at it as this, singular thing and either criticize it or say everything's great. I think you've got to sort of break it down into different segments when you're thinking about generative AI.
On that, I would like to jump in on that, as Thomas made the question in the direction of, in the old days, and you had that more or less ingenious form of advertising with its smartness. You collect for the Gen AI from databases, which are, so to say, not cleaned up. So how with all that smelly stuff, garbage, or not useful data, you create something so vividly coming across as new, brilliant, and smart?
For generative AI, I think, when you're using generative AI, one of the things that people always say is, as you say, it's about data. Garbage in, garbage out. So if you're going to use generative AI, you either have to be very good at prompting, making sure that you're providing very clear direction, or you're training it extremely well. Because, one of the problems that most people have when it comes to generative AI, and if people are not well trained on it, they think that they can create something through zero-shot prompting, meaning just putting that, prompt in once and thinking that something good will come out. And obviously we all know now, after having had training, that you've got to train it, and then you have to do a few shots prompting before something good comes out. And with co-pilots, like ChatGPT and Claude, there's an expectation that you have to go back and forth quite a few times before you get the final sort of, output. But I think in the end, just with any type of communication or any prompting, you've got to give it direction, right? And they tell you that you've got to type in, what's your role? What are you expecting it to do? And what are the sort of guardrails around your prompt so that it doesn't come out in ways that are unpredictable.
Okay.
So,
I mean, after all, it's a probabilistic technology, so there is a modicum of unpredictability in there, just by definition. But getting a little back, so I mean, creativity is an unpredictable process as well. So if I look at creative directors and of ad agencies, let's say 10 years ago or 5 years ago, they probably worked very different from now. In how far is the concept of creativity changed? So, because I mean, they dreamt up amazing pictures, amazing texts, amazing scenes, and now they ask something to dream up an amazing thing. So, and which is a totally different level of possibly creativity, or well, at least totally different type of work. So, what is the impact on these types of people, these roles?
So let's put it this way: the way that like a brand agency works probably hasn't changed that much, meaning that as we know, ChatGPTs and other LLMs and other image generating generative AI tools, create mediocrity, right? Because it's based on what's happened in the past. And so one of the things that they're not very good at yet is creating something original. So brand agency creatives are still being tasked with creating original concepts, original campaigns. Where their jobs may differ a little bit is if a client says, I don't really like this caption, or I don't really like the scene, they can go straight into a generative AI tool and change that image. Whereas before they'd say, give us a few days or come back with, a new sort of direction. So in that way, they're benefiting from it. So, but, there are other types of agencies where, let's say with digital agencies, where you're creating programmatic creative that's based off of something original, but you're sort of adapting it for something else. That type of work probably is changing very quickly, because creative directors probably don't have to do a lot of work now with generative AI to recreate it and readapt it. So how's that job changing? It's changing slowly, but instead of a creative director, you may have creative technologist who understands how generative AI tools work and know how to adapt using prompts. Or instead of a copywriter who writes great headlines and messages, there may be copy editors who are looking at the output of generative AI, going, this is how you would edit and this is how I would prompt. So it's not a huge 180-degree shift, but there's slight changes that are already starting to happen because technology and use of technologies is becoming important.
You interestingly just used the term derivative, which coincidentally is a term that I often use for this type of AI. I call them often derivative AI instead of generative, because that's ultimately what they are doing. In one of our last CRM convos, a marketer shot back at that. He said, hey, what you are doing as a human is derivative as well, because you're bound in your context. You have your education, you have your experience. Means there's nothing, quote unquote, nothing original in there as well. It's all has been seen before in one shape or the other. So
There's nothing new under the sun.
what would you say to that? What would we respond that person? I actually didn't have an answer.
A little bit. I think it's a little bit harsh to say that all anyone is doing is derivative, because I think there's, I have hope in human creativity. Even if you have technology, in the end, it's up to you to interpret what that output creates, and it's always the human being who's then shifting it and readapting it for something else. And that's why, when you think about copyright, nobody gets copyright of anything because of prompt engineering, but you get copyright because you actually adapt an image that was created by generative AI. So that human creativity, human view of something, and being able to interpret and reinterpret, I don't think is a bad term at all. And, why would you have revisionist history or revisionist view of anything? All these things, shift the perspective. Even slightly shifting the perspective can mean something unique, and it can start a new conversation. So I don't see it as a bad thing at all.
That's an interesting perspective, especially if you go to academic work. If you go for your PhD, for instance, if you're not taking your area, but in history, you have to go to old written stuff and books and have to interpret and analyze, and such is derivative to a certain degree. Or if you're in jurisdiction, you have hundreds of law cases you have to analyze, which could indeed be made a bit more easier with such a generative AI. But when it comes
it generates the cases,
it has to be trained quite properly and not too innovative to say so, and it has to be trained properly, such as the Ethics Commission in Germany, for instance, found out that if you have a lot of male training persons, instead of that you have an equivalent of females and males, you have already a certain guidance in the training.
Sure. I mean, I think that's one of the things that everyone encourages, right? So whenever you're training or whenever you're looking at the output, to make sure that you're looking at it from very different perspectives, so it doesn't become homogenous. And I think that's really important for any organization. And it goes back to just the training. Companies always ask me when I go into training, what are some of the things that we need to think about? And I always start off by saying you need to have governance, and you have to understand, the privacy, transparency, and ethics of AI. And I sort of go into all of the different variations of this. And of course, if you read about this, people, it's written and it's a best practice, but at the same time you have to give examples that's relevant for your industry, to make sure that you're looking at it from many different perspectives.
So now, as many of those businesses are probably using the same tools, and the prompts are probably quite similar as well, how to differentiate oneself? Getting out of this instant mediocrity thing. What are those businesses doing?
So one of the things that I'm sort of moving into and encouraging companies to do is to go into agentic AI versus Copilot. So if you think about like ChatGPT or Claude or any of these foundational tools, they are sort of defined as copilots because you're constantly talking back and forth to get output. With agentic AI, you're automating the workflow, right? So one of the great things about automating the workflow is if you look under the hood, you're actually programming the system that governs the agentic AI. And when you look at that system, you'll be actually surprised at how sophisticated the system architecture, meaning the coding of it, is. And I believe that that's where you're going to start differentiating, because that system will really impact the way that you train that LLM and what output comes in and how you make it as unique as possible from a tonal perspective and etc. So, people have been talking about agentic AI since the beginning of 2025. And if you look at anything on LinkedIn, there's a lot more sort of volume on it. But there's something there that's really quite attractive and powerful for companies that are creating content, because you have so much more power. To me, after having read about it, trained on this, I realize now that the prompt engineering part is just the final output, but really creating that system is really very, very important to create something unique.
Okay. That's interesting.
Is the creation of the prompts a part that gets automated as well?
Does it get automated? No. It can be automated. It really depends on how much automation you need. But with this agentic AI system, they always say that you have to have human in the loop at some point so that you review the output. So I don't think you can all be.
They say.
Well, we have a skeptic here. But yeah, I mean, at a certain point, if you want to differentiate yourself, you do have to think about how to make that content unique.
That is exactly the point when I would like to jump in, Thomas, forgive me, that
No.
in the area, well, then
Never.
The case, you have not only be in normal advertising and AI-driven advertising, but also in a very critical arena such as life science. I was wondering, that is quite a topic from privacy, security, data governance, where you have to be very careful how you drive things towards. Can you elaborate a bit on that? Why you have chosen exactly that area?
So part of the reason why we've chosen life sciences as an area of focus for our workflows and for our sort of solutions is partly because I've spent like 10 years with healthcare and life sciences advertising and marketing, and helped with a lot of launches. And so I understand the background and the needs and the specific sort of criteria. And one of the key things that, is quite clear that, you have very general foundational LLMs and some specialized solutions, etc. But the one thing that really is going to differentiate you is not how well you can do something, very broadly or very generally, but you have to understand the industry and the specifics and the pain points really well. Otherwise, it really does become, garbage in and garbage out. And people will know, clients will know immediately if you really understand the nuances of the industry and the expectations. So part of it is because of my experience, but part of it is because of the challenges of doing regulated communications and bringing generative AI into it, that you just have to be so much more judicious. You have to look at the details. Like we were actually trying to train a model very recently, and we were just looking at every single claim that was made and how do you footnote it? How do you make sure that everything is, subject to what the client's needs are? And you've got to think about the entire review process, and every word that you write, has to be supported by a claim. And so you can't just say things in it. So in some ways it's very challenging, and it really is a sort of a challenge that is a different type, where it's governed by these compliance regulations, and it's what I sort of enjoy, just seeing if you can crack the code on something that's harder versus easier.
Outsmarted, to say so.
Outsmart the regulations? No. Agentic AI for these types of scenario has a challenge, because we had it before. It's probabilistic as a technology. So the outcome is not necessarily guaranteed. Might be very similar each time, might not be, and might be just slightly off to be compliant. So how do you cope with that?
So we've experienced some of the hallucinations of LLMs, and it won't go anywhere if it starts recreating sentences and interpreting sentences differently. But if you look at some of these life sciences companies, what they have started establishing, like decentralized content sort of tools, where you have approved messages, approved headlines, approved images. And until now, it was sort of created manually. And this is where it can become much, much easier if you can automate it, and so that the content can be created in minutes versus days, right? So that's where we're sort of focusing on creating content hubs made up of approved messaging, approved images, approved headlines, so that what you're doing is almost like a conveyor belt, creating a manufacturing conveyor belt of messages, but doing it automatically. And that works really well, extremely well.
Where do those approved messages, headlines, etc. come from?
They come from the client.
That is still human work or still
automated
work as well?
At the moment, it's human work. But where the bottleneck comes in is if you think about the sort of programmatic and digital nature of communications now, and think of life sciences. Okay, so let's say a pharma company has launched a product and it needs to communicate to people. Well, they have multiple stakeholders. They have physicians. They have in the United States, they can communicate with patients. So you have patient communications. You can have communications to the nurse, physician assistant, etc. So you actually have multiple stakeholders, who are living on and interacting with different digital platforms. So if you think about that, suddenly communications and content, scale up and become voluminous. And so even if you have a campaign, you have so many stakeholders that you're spending a lot of money, asking agencies to create these manually. Well, imagine if you can automate this and say, well, for this stakeholder, I just want this and this and this, and it automates and creates faster. It means, it has a benefit for the pharma company in that creating all these stakeholder communications doesn't become a burden of cost and time.
So what you're basically saying, personalization.
Personalization through through automation. Yes, absolutely.
Well, the buzzword is mass personalization at scale, I guess. What is realistic there then? So are these companies still working on a cohort base, or are they really at a level that they can individualize message so that there's a Noriko message, a Ralph message, and a Thomas message?
I think if they have the first party content, they can personalize it to a certain extent. They have to make sure that they are ethical with the data that they have. But let's say that they are, if the sales force is going to meet a doctor, you can have a personalized message in terms of addressing the person and providing certain pain points that practice may have. So you can personalize it to a certain extent. Obviously, there's so much about privacy in healthcare and regulated industries. You have to be very careful about what data you have. But I think there's some element of personalization that can be developed.
Our friend Graham comes in with an interesting question. Can you comment on the power and relevance of being clear about the audience your adverts are trying to communicate with? There seems to be a potential for AI to adjust it. So this goes a little into the topic that you actually just talked about.
Definitely with digital and programmatic advertising, there is a potential for AI to be much more dynamic. I would say that in non-regulated industries, it's probably more realistic to be able to dynamically change the content based on the audience's reaction and response to the advertising, right? A/B testing, you know, based on the preference of the image, etc. When it becomes more regulated, you need approval, so that may be, you know, hindered. But in terms of other types of advertising, absolutely, it can be real-time insight, you know, aggregation and real-time editing of the messages or the images, and all of that can be done through generative AI. Absolutely.
How about using synthetic data for this?
You could, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, synthetic or federated data, you know, which is not so that people's privacy can be sort of protected. I mean, especially in the life sciences, you know, synthetic biology has become really, really popular. So, you know, that's less within the communications realm, more in terms of clinical trials. But synthetic data has become very popular in terms of, you know, reducing the time to, you know, get findings for clinical trials, and etc. But absolutely, some data that's synthetic can also help. Yeah. But the flip side of that is but the flip side of that is making sure that the data is, you know, accurate. You know, there's so much out there that can be sort of not quite accurate and not exactly what the marketer needs in terms of understanding the insights, right? So
you just, no, not just, but in one of the other statements before, you mentioned that the nuance of knowledge and interpreting the data into the right direction is also a measurement of the quality of understanding. So the life science approach you have chosen out of experience is a bit like New York, New York. If you can make it here, you can make it everywhere. Such as, is that the bridgehead to other industry specifics?
You know, for us, it is. You know,
Cool.
we're using life sciences as a one aspect, you know, one way to get in. You know, the other expansion would be a natural expansion from life sciences is financial services, which is as regulated as
and
life
insurances.
Yes. So for us, we've gone this way, and we can go other ways as well. But again, you have to have some sort of comfort in that industry. So, you know, it would be really natural for us to go from life sciences to health and wellness, right? Because you know, health and wellness is a very big area, but not everything is about prescriptive drugs. But it could be like vitamins, supplements, etc. It could be lifestyle, etc., dieting. But all of those are sort of interrelated. So definitely, you know, a great way to expand as well.
So do you have experts in your several companies which are focusing on these dedicated industries and knowledgeable to talk and prompt into the nuances?
Yes. So we have somebody, we actually, my company is made up of 3 founders. Myself, my background is mostly in insights and strategy, and another co-founder is actually trained as a creative director. So even though we've been talking about how creative directors, you know, role is changing, I think you still need for communications a creative director's eye, so that they can review the output and provide guidance. And then the third person that is a co-founder is a technical co-founder, and yes, and actually he's German.
We are everywhere.
And he's the one who oversees all the developers and makes sure that everything we're creating is you know, exactly what we expected. So there's 3 of us, and then we have others who are sort of adjacent to us who have these different specializations, so that we, are sort of honest and can be sort of the, knowledge workers who understand the industry, because without it, it's really difficult. I think you can only go so much and say that you know something, but you can really tell when you start talking to somebody about their knowledge of the process, their knowledge of the pain points, and their knowledge of, what looks good.
And you are all in the US as founders, or are you not only being born in some different countries and having that experience, but you live all in the US right now?
So all of us are in the US. Myself and the creative director, we're in the New York area, and the technical co-founder is in San Francisco area. The interesting thing is that myself and the German co-founder were born outside of the United States, so that we have a little bit of a different perspective, and that's not a bad thing at all. That
That's good,
you're coming to it from a different mindset, world, a global perspective, and that's what's needed now in this sort of day and age where, technology can take you anywhere, and your customers can come from anywhere as well. So, yeah.
I mean, different perspectives anyways lead to interesting solutions, because you have different sets of blinds on your face, and that gives, that often has results. Let's put it like that.
It's great that, at least, one person comes from a European perspective. Although, we've all lived in different countries. There's something fundamental about where you come from. So, worst comes to worst, I can, and I will look at it from an Asian perspective, and then the German, co-founder will sometimes look at it from a European perspective, and then the American guy looks at it from the American perspective.
That is, honestly speaking, marvelous, as you cover a lot of, let's say, expectation setting from these cultures, from these law and governance perspectives, which are so different.
It's good. It's helpful. We bring something different, and we challenge each other. But the interesting thing, the commonality between all of us, is that we spent years in advertising. So even though we bring different baggage to the table, there's one common thing, is that we understand what the advertising industry is, so that's one common sort of experience that we can always go back to.
Out of curiosity, you said that one of your co-founders is a creative director, or has been. How does he or she see the job of a creative director in 5 years? Did you talk about that? Well, if not, no harm done.
We talk about it all the time. And there's the good side, and there's obviously the bad side. If you've grown up and most of your work was done through manual sort of brainstorming and coming up with ideas, and had expectations of how work was done, some of it is going away, and it's a shift. It's an incredible shift. But we always talk about the good things that are coming, how creativity is changing. And, so as I mentioned before, creative directors, a lot of them will shift to a creative technologist, but that opens up a huge world. So there's something that, whenever there's change, there's something that you have to say goodbye to, right? And something that you have to just hand off. But there's always the benefit of learning something new. And we're just in this incredible time when everyone needs to learn something new. Like, if you're not taking a course on AI, I think everyone should be taking a course, regardless of what level you are, how senior or how junior you are. And that it's a time for a lot of discovery. So I try to look at it on a positive note, less negative. And I'm hoping that everyone in my company thinks that way too.
How does this, I mean, if you have a certain level of seniority, also as a creative director, you're probably no more bringing those or creating those ideas yourself, but are just asking someone, well, your team basically, hey, come forward with yada, yada, yada. So I'm not a marketing person, so I don't have an idea what to ask for. In how far is that different to asking a machine?
It's not that different. I think the biggest frustration would probably be if you have something in the back of your mind about what you want created and how you control AI so that it creates exactly what you want it to. And you see enough of that on LinkedIn. Like you see the images on LinkedIn and you know that there's a huge spectrum of ones that look really very basic to things that are very sophisticated. So I suppose it's not that different, but the biggest difference is that when you are a very senior creative director and you're asking somebody, a human being, you're drawing it, providing direction, explaining it in words, you may be putting video in front of them going, this is, and, the impression and, the guidance comes from multiple perspectives. And I suppose you can do that with AI as well. You can feed some things, but it's a little bit different when you're talking to a computer, right? So that's a shift. That's a major shift. Yeah.
Sorry, Ralph, I broke.
Yeah, I'm in reflection mode right now as I was on that trip on the different creation trips and the opportunities and how that is influenced by the industries. And what I was wondering, as I'm very much in data cleaning and proper data handling, that how the artificial intelligence can be used to improve transparency and address some of the skepticism Thomas already mentioned regarding not only data privacy in advertising, but really helps to get advertising which is more touching, more catching, more filled with humor, and something which is really seen or experienced as new and having the trick. Yeah, that is
I think it'll be very interesting to see how AI is going to change the types of advertising that is going to be seen. I mean, if you look at how TV and print was and how social media advertising is done, it's slightly different. And now you have influencers who are creating their own ads, so everything is morphing. In terms of transparency, you do have to provide clear sort of expectations of when you're using AI and how you're using AI and how you've been targeted. And that's already happening with social media, right? So, when you receive an ad and you want to know why you were targeted, you do have to have that information. It's not going to be that different. It's just about being transparent and then making sure that you're sort of up to date with the compliance regulations that are coming into place. And I think that's where AI can be helpful. Everyone thinks about AI as being all about creativity, but when you think about it, you can have AI agents that are trained to look at, is this within regulation or not? And that's a very repetitive task, right? So agentic AI can help you be more transparent, more compliant, so that I think there's a lot of different ways in which AI agents or AI can be of benefit. I mean, there's challenges, but let's think about some of the benefits and think of some of the rule-based reviews that have to be done for any social media, and some of that could be done by automation. So
yeah. If
rule-based,
and it's interesting, as in Frankfurt there is a museum for advertising, and it has a lot of films and historical films, and especially if you are into marketing and you have a favor for how advertising was done in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and how it is developing, and you see that catching the person at its need and wishes at the right moment, there is so much theoretically improvement for the advertising to catch me in the moment of truth, or when I just need the impulse to buy the new car because we get a new baby or my kids get a new baby. That is exactly what I'm missing in the moment right now.
I'm not.
About the
Actually, I find that intrusive. So that leads me a bit to benefits, right? So if I'm nudged into buying something that I may or may not need, well, I don't have much of a benefit of that. So, well, the benefit is my wallet is a bit lighter, so I don't need to carry that much. But where do the benefits lie on using more and more technology in advertisement? You say it's not only good for the creative people as well.
Well, I mean, if you strip it all down about advertising, it really is about selling. So Ralph talked about, the moment of truth, which has always been something that we try and strive towards to understand when is that moment of truth. But it is intrusive, but that is what advertising has always been. It's always been there to persuade you to purchase something, whether you want it or not. And most of the times you buy things that you don't necessarily think you need, but it touches you, it connects with you. So
doesn't that get worse?
It could get worse, but this is basically sort of liberal sort of capitalism, right? When you are allowed to communicate things, and it's up to you as the consumer whether you want to purchase or not. Yes, there's a level of intrusion that comes with it, and maybe that's where a lot of the criticism is. But it's also about, in the end, I think you can talk about advertising and marketing philosophically, but in the end, it is about selling, and it is about getting people to purchase something.
The challenge between ethical correctness and manipulation is getting very tricky. And as Thomas was reacting quite impulsive on that, what I saw as, I would love to have my personalized ad, which is catching me in the right moment, as I'm very much in marketing, and I would think this as, wow, cool, how did they do it? Thomas would probably be intimidated and say, hey,
annoyed, not intimidated.
Annoyed.
It's different, very different. What I mean, at the right moment is okay, but at the right moment, I don't want a nudge. What I want then is information, which
and the right size and amount of information, and to the on the spot, such as, hi, I do not need 500 messages in LinkedIn which are filling my inbox. I would like to know that I'm searching for a new car right now. Which would be the best deal here around the next 50 miles? And I would like to know if they can deliver it on time, on my budget, and if they do me some favors. That would be that kind of messaging I would like to receive. And on the other end, fantastic messaging, but if the checkout in the online shop is crap, never shop again there. That's the experience I had today. And I complained. I wrote them. I said, you are creating a marvelous expectation, and then the checkout is just a nightmare.
Well,
maybe they don't want your money.
Yeah, you're right. That is exactly what I wrote. Thomas, exact my words. I say, okay, customer are überschätzt.
Overestimated, yeah.
Yeah, overestimated. They are not needed. They are annoying. Yeah, they disturb you in your daily life. Oh God. No, honest. I was so mad that I wrote my wife, sorry, honey, I cannot buy these balsam stuff and all these nice vinegars and all this because they are too stupid to take my money to check me properly out. They do not accept my MasterCard. Yeah. And I tried it 8 times and I tried different ways of payment and they goofed and they had the guts to say, yeah, well, we like that you love our advertising and you like that. And we are so sorry that you have a problem. Just pay in advance. That will solve and that will be, that will work. And then I wrote back, I do not intend to pay in advance because I want to use my credit card. Guess why? Yeah? That is the point where I say there is a gap which is opening up, such as marvelous agentic-driven AI-based cool advertising, and then the rest is still Stonehenge or more or less caveman-like. That is not my expectation.
Well, I mean, I think since, as, digital experiences have been with us for over 20 years, I mean, that's the one question that's always been at the center of any digital experience, right? Is it seamless from the start to finish? And that is what every, brand has to create. And obviously what Thomas was saying is that the way that he needs to be communicated to has to fit with my style, which is education, not being in my face. So all these things are personalized style of communication that you want, and you're hoping that the brands understand that through the interaction. So there's obviously still work to be done, and that means that there's still work for all of us, right? These brands,
luckily, we are not yet obsolete.
Exactly. So
you made a very important statement on that you would like to see that people are properly trained so that they are not just playing around in curiosity, but after the point of curiosity and playing around, that they should get an honest coaching or a guidance to get the most out of it. Why is I go for a lot of research and found out that it is a common issue which is mentioned, but why the heck are the organizations not working on this? I have the impression they are too less or too scrouchy to invest in their people.
I think again, we have to be really careful when we talk about organizations, just as when we're talking about advertising industry. Like if you're looking at these organizations, there are some organizations that are very proactive and very supportive of generative AI. And you always know these companies because the C-level are talking about it, they're embracing it, and they're the ones who are pushing it. Then there are some organizations where the C-level isn't saying very much about how much they're embracing generative AI. And then there's some organizations that are not embracing it at all. So if you think about it, if the organization isn't embracing it, why would they train their people? Some of them may even prohibit its employees from using generative AI. I think the worst is, if you're quiet about it and not providing any guidance to your workers about where you stand. And I think you need to be quite clear where it is. So I think there's more, it's a little bit more nuanced than why they're learning. I think and within each company, there's such a spectrum of, generative AI usage. I mean, I went to train a group recently, and it was within one department, but within one department, there were people who had already taken classes personally, and there were people who only used ChatGPT or some LLM like twice in a week. So you have this huge spectrum. So it takes a lot of effort for each organization to bring people up to a certain perspective, certain level. So yeah, so it's a little bit more complicated, but I just did want to sort of give you the nuances of how tricky it is to train a group within your organization.
One of the questions that one as an analyst always has is, where are the high value scenarios? So because frankly, you don't see many. Yeah? From your experience, is that probably because those are kept under the hood because they are basically a trade secret? I mean, they are creating a transitionary advantage for me and my business, so I better don't talk about that. Is that the case? Or are there really no really high value scenarios that you see?
I think there are use cases occurring all the time, but you have to be really careful about how you communicate it internally and externally. I've heard a lot from internal employees who are afraid of their jobs. So how are you going to, communicate that internally? How are you going to, talk about it? So I think there are enough companies out there. If you look at their use cases, you see what they've done, but you also have, cases of, Gen AI adoption that's gone wrong. I mean, there's quite a few cases that are coming out that way as well. So it really is about being very sort of stepwise and very thoughtful, and making sure that you start off with a pilot that is not going to impact your entire company's reputation, but also have learning. So, although the technology industry has been talking about generative AI for a long time, there are many companies that are just starting it. So what is in mass communication and what technology companies and consulting companies are saying and what's happening in each company is very different. So you got to keep those two separate.
Now that we are approaching the top of the hour, man, that flew by. We are usually ending with famous last words. Well, we don't want to terminate you, but sooner or later we need to terminate the session. Marketing. So the value equation changed totally. So in our pre-talk, you said something like the magic is gone or is different. Or it's taken out. It was to the extent it's taken out of the creating, out of the process, basically. And it has become transactional. This is what you said here a few minutes earlier as well. So that means the value of AI is changing marketing. Where to? And what in 5 years from now will be the value of AI when everybody's using it?
I think that marketing agencies, advertising agencies will not look like what it's looked like in the last 50 years. I don't think that you will recognize it. Possibly half the humans will be gone, and the agentic AI will be the other part of the workforce. So, yeah, I think it's the human AI collaboration will probably be very literal by that time. So it'll be very interesting to see what is a definition of a workforce in 5 years' time.
Yeah, maybe Mark Benioff is right, saying when he says that he already has a workforce that is partly digital.
Yeah, exactly. So it'll be very interesting, but marketing has been impacted. It's one of the biggest places that's been impacted. So I think we have to see a very different sort of iteration and definition.
And how different? So how do you envision it looking like in 5 years?
I see it very differently. I see it as primarily, our company, we're keeping it very small. Humans are going to be the minority, and the agentic force is going to be the majority for us. And we'd love to see if other companies are going to be like that too.
So more automation,
Automation.
automatically driven. Yeah.
Yes, robotic.
The
Automation.
marketing bot.
Yes, marketing bot. Absolutely. Yeah. Come and talk to me in 5 years' time.
We
come
will.
back.
We'll take you up on that.
Probably we asked you in the time in between to be our guest again, because we enjoyed it very much.
Oh, thank you so much
Yes.
for having me. This was a really great conversation. I just really
Yes,
enjoyed
it
talking
was.
to you both.
Yeah. Thanks to you too, and thanks to Graham for his good question. And well, for our audience, so we'll go backstage in a minute. And if you want to tune in next week when we dive into how CX customer experiences are looking different across regions, like Japan and Germany, for example. I mean, the customer expectations probably are vastly different, driven by different cultures. And Ekaterina Mironova, who we'll be talking to next week, is quite experienced in working with those differences. Okay, see you then, and bye for now.
And take care.